That place is for blood relatives only. Those were the first words my Aunt Velda said when she saw my son standing beside me on the front porch of our ancestral home. Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. The coldness behind her words cut sharper than if she'd shouted. My hands instinctively found Micah's shoulders, pulling him just a little closer. He didn't say anything. He didn't cry or look confused or run and hide behind my legs like I thought he would. He just stared at her. And then he did something that made the entire room behind her, the room filled with my family, cousins, uncles, even my own mother, go completely silent. He stepped forward slowly and held something out to her. A photo. A framed photo of him sitting beside Grandpa Elias on the garden bench behind this very house. Grandpa had his hand on Micah's shoulder. They were smiling. Micah's smile, small and shy, Grandpa's wide and full of life, like he was proud to be sitting next to the little boy everyone in that house now refused to let in. Micah looked up at my aunt and said clearly, "Then why am I the only one he called before he died?" The room behind her, which had been buzzing with quiet voices, the clinking of glasses, the sound of forks against plates, just stopped. The air dropped in temperature. You could feel it, like someone had sucked all the heat and comfort out of the world in a single breath. It's funny how a child's voice, calm, innocent, without a trace of anger, can feel like thunder. Velda didn't move. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. And in that silence, I felt everything. I felt every door they'd closed on me when I got pregnant, every holiday I'd spent alone while they pretended I didn't exist, every time Micah asked why he didn't have a grandma like the kids at school, and I had to lie to soften the truth. Micah had been nothing but gentle, curious, kind. He'd never asked to be born into a family that treated him like a stain. But my grandfather, Elias Whitmore, he never treated him that way, even when everyone else did. He would call sometimes. Not often and never for long, but always in that voice of his, steady, deep, and warm. "Is Micah there?" he'd ask. "I just want to say hi, that's all." Micah loved those calls. And 3 months ago, Elias came to visit us in secret. He said he was running errands in our city, but I knew he made the 2-hour drive just to see his great-grandson. That was the day the photo was taken. I didn't know then that it would be the last time they'd see each other. A week ago, I got the call. Grandpa had died, heart failure, quietly in his sleep. But before he slipped away, he made one final phone call. Just one. To my son, to Micah. Not to his children, not to Velda or Marcus or my mother. He called a 9-year-old boy who his family refused to acknowledge. A boy he'd only known a short time, but loved deeply. Micah had answered on the second ring. He sat on his bed, the framed photo already on his nightstand, and listened to a man tell him, "You're my legacy, you hear me? Not because of blood, because of heart now, standing on the porch of the Whitmore Ancestral home, surrounded by people who looked like me, but didn't love like me. I realized Micah had carried more than a photo here today. He'd carried truth. That house, built on generations of pride and secrets, was silent. Micah looked up at me and whispered, "I just wanted to say goodbye." I looked at my aunt. She still hadn't moved. Neither had the others watching from the living room behind her. I don't know if she was ashamed or afraid or just shocked that a child could say something so simple and make a fortress of ego crumble in seconds. But what I do know is this. In that moment, everyone in that house realized the truth. My son, the one they didn't want, was the only one Grandpa chose to call before he died, and no one could say a word, not a single word. I should have known this was how it would go. Driving up the winding gravel road toward the Whitmore Ancestral house felt like revisiting a place I had buried, along with the version of myself that once belonged there. The trees still arched over the path like cathedral beams, the white porch still wrapped around the house like a ribbon, holding everything together. But it didn't feel like home, not anymore. My name is Amara Whitmore, and this house, this family, once meant everything to me. I grew up here. I used to ride my bike down the back trail past the river, sneak cookies from the kitchen when Aunt Velda wasn't looking, fall asleep on the couch with my head in Grandpa Elias's lap during Sunday football. My mother, Delia, was the quiet matriarch, always present but rarely affectionate. My brother, Marcus, was everyone's golden boy. I was the spirited one, the dreamer, the one who wanted more than just tradition and Southern expectations. And then I got pregnant. At 21, just 2 weeks before graduating college, component placement. I found out I was going to have a baby. His name was Julian, Micah's father. He wasn't from town. He was kind, brilliant, and very much not what the Whitmore family approved of. Black, raised in Chicago, and working as a traveling documentary photographer. I knew my family wouldn't welcome him, but I didn't expect them to completely shut the door on me. When I told them I was keeping the baby, my mother didn't say a word. She just got up from the table and walked out of the room. Velda told me I was throwing my life away. Marcus said I was being selfish. Not one of them asked if I was okay. Not one asked how I felt. Only one person called the next day, Grandpa Elias. "I don't know what they're so angry about," he said, his voice low and gruff. "Sounds to me like you're doing something brave." That was 10 years ago. After Julian died in a car accident when I was 5 months pregnant, I left town. I didn't want Micah growing up around people who looked at him like a complication. We moved to Charleston. I started over. I built a life for him, a warm one, a quiet one. I never told Micah he was rejected. I didn't want him to carry that, but he always asked, "Why don't we visit your family? Do I have cousins? Can I meet your mom?" I used to say, "They live far away," or "maybe someday." And every time I said it, I hated myself a little bit more. Still, Micah had this unshakable curiosity about where I came from. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something deeper. But every time he asked, I could see it. The longing to belong to something bigger than just the two of us. The only connection he ever really had was with my grandfather. Grandpa Elias would call on birthdays, mail letters written in blocky handwriting, and once drove to see us without telling anyone. They spent that entire afternoon in our backyard eating ice cream and talking about bugs. Micah still has the photo from that day in his room. 3 weeks ago when Grandpa died, I didn't know if I should go back. I didn't want to. Not really. But Micah looked up at me the morning we got the news and said, "Can we go say goodbye?" I froze. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even sad, at least not on the outside. But there was something in his voice that sounded like a plea. Not for closure. Not even for Elias, but for a connection to the people who never gave him a chance. So I said yes. I packed his tiny navy blue backpack, filled the car with snacks and audiobooks, and made the 2-hour drive back to a town that forgot how to say my name without shame. When we pulled into the driveway and saw the house, big, white, beautiful, I felt my stomach turn. Micah was quiet the whole way there. I asked if he was okay, and he nodded, fiddling with something in his lap. I didn't realize it until we arrived that he'd brought a photo frame with him, the one with him and Grandpa Elias. He didn't tell me why, but later I'd understand. He wasn't just there to say goodbye. He was there to speak a truth no one else was brave enough to say. And I would watch as my son, the boy they once refused to acknowledge, became the only person in that house who had nothing to prove. Because love isn't something you earn. It's something you are. We parked under the old oak tree out front, the same one I used to climb as a girl when I wanted to be anywhere but inside that house. The branches still curled like reaching arms, but the shade felt heavier now, almost like it knew. Micah got out first. He held the frame against his chest with both hands, like it was something fragile. I'd offered to carry it, but he shook his head. He didn't say anything the entire walk up to the porch. Neither did I. The screen door creaked open before we even knocked. Aunt Velda stood in the doorway like she'd been posted there for hours, waiting to see if I'd actually come. "Amara," she said flatly. Her eyes slid past me to Micah. "Didn't think we'd see both of you." There it was, that emphasis, that invisible wall she built with 5 words. I didn't respond. Velda stepped aside halfway, just enough for me to walk in. Then she looked straight at Micah and added, "He can stay outside." Micah blinked up at her. I said, "Excuse me?" Velda didn't flinch. "That place is for blood relatives only. He's not part of the family line. You know that." I felt my heart crack open in my chest, but it wasn't rage I felt first. It was shame. Shame that I knew this was coming and brought him anyway. Shame that I let myself believe, even for a second, that this family had changed. Micah looked up at me, eyebrows slightly furrowed, confused but calm. I crouched next to him. "Wait here on the swing, okay?" He didn't move. "I'll just talk to them for a minute and then we'll leave," I said, already knowing that's what I was going to do. But before I could stand, Micah spoke. "Why can't I come in?" His voice was small, honest, like he was genuinely trying to understand. Velda crossed her arms. "That house carries generations of our people. It's not a place for outsiders." "Outsiders?" I repeated. "He's Elias's great-grandson." "Elias made mistakes," she snapped. "That doesn't mean we have to double down on them." I stood slowly, letting the words settle between us like dust. The screen door creaked again, and my brother, Marcus, stepped out. His face was unreadable. He looked at me and said, "It's not a good time, Amara." My hands clenched at my sides. When is a good time to let a child grieve the only person in this family who ever loved him? No one answered. Micah hadn't moved. He looked down at the photo in his hands, his thumb rubbing the edge of the frame. I turned to go. I was done. I'd brought my son here hoping to give him a piece of his history, and instead I was giving him a front-row seat to my greatest heartbreak. I should have protected him better. But then something happened. Micah stepped off the porch swing and walked past me, past Marcus, past Velda, and stood right at the threshold of the front door. He held up the frame and said, "He called me before he died." Velda froze. "What?" Micah's voice didn't shake. "Grandpa called me the night before he died." Marcus looked at me like I'd staged it. My mother, who had been watching silently from the hallway, covered her mouth with her hand. Micah continued, "He told me I was his legacy, that I was part of the family even if some people didn't see it." And then he asked the question that no one was prepared for. "Then why am I the only one he called?" The silence hit like thunder. You know those moments when something shifts in the room and you can't see it, but you feel it? That was it. Velda stared at him, her face pale. Behind her, people stopped whispering. Conversations paused. A fork clattered onto a plate. No one moved. No one breathed. I watched as the weight of a child's truth landed with more force than any argument I could have made. Micah didn't say another word. He just turned, walked back down the steps, and sat on the swing, this time facing away from the door. And in that moment, I realized the conflict wasn't just between me and my family. It was between truth and tradition, between a past built on exclusion and a child who refused to be erased from it. The thing that scared them most wasn't Micah's presence. It was that he belonged more than any of them ever wanted to admit. I sat next to Micah on that old wooden swing. It creaked under our weight, just like it used to when I was a kid. Only now it felt like the last safe place on this property. The air was thick, too quiet. No one inside moved. They just watched us through the screen like we were ghosts. Micah's hands were folded in his lap, the frame still pressed against his chest. "You okay?" I asked softly. He nodded. "I just wanted them to know." I blinked fast to hold back the sting behind my eyes. "You did good, baby." He looked out toward the gravel drive, eyes steady. "I think Grandpa wanted me to." I turned toward him. "What do you mean?" Micah shifted the frame into his lap and traced the edge of the photo with one finger. "The night he called me. He said, 'Sometimes telling the truth makes people upset, but it still needs to be told.'" I hadn't known what Grandpa said on that call. I didn't ask. Micah hadn't offered, and I didn't want to push. But now, sitting in that silence, I realized Grandpa knew this was coming. Maybe he didn't want Micah to just be part of the family. Maybe he wanted him to claim it. That realization shifted something in me. For so long I had kept my head down, kept us small. I told myself I was protecting Micah by avoiding confrontation, by keeping him at a distance from the people who judged him before he could even walk. But Micah wasn't broken. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't hiding. He stood up there and faced them when I couldn't. That wasn't just courage. That was legacy. I sat up straighter. My heartbeat steadied. For the first time since we'd arrived, I felt grounded. "I need to do something," I said, more to myself than to him. Micah looked over at me. "Are we leaving?" I paused. "Soon. But first, I want you to see something." He tilted his head, curious. I stood and reached for his hand. "We're going to say goodbye, properly." He nodded and slipped his small fingers into mine. I led him through the side yard down the cobblestone path that circled around the house to the garden, Grandpa Elias's garden. It was overgrown now, not like it used to be when he was alive, but the layout was still there. The stone bench, the bird feeder, the little sundial with the cracked face. That's where they'd placed his memorial portrait, tucked between a hedge and the rose bushes. Micah let go of my hand and walked toward it slowly, reverently. He crouched in front of the frame and placed his photo, the one of him and Grandpa, right beside it. And then he whispered, "Hi, Grandpa." I came. I turned my head so he wouldn't see me cry. "I brought the picture you gave me," he continued. "I told them, just like you said." He stood up and turned to me. "Can I leave it here?" I nodded. Yes, I think he'd like that. Micah stepped back and stood silently for a moment, his hands at his sides. The wind picked up just slightly, rustling the trees. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone standing at the edge of the garden path. It was Marcus. His arms were crossed, face unreadable. He didn't say anything, just watched. I didn't move, didn't speak. After a few moments, he walked toward us. Slowly, each step like it carried 10 years of things he didn't say. He stopped beside Micah and looked down at the photo. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, an old pocket watch. The kind Grandpa used to carry, gold and worn with age. "He left this," Marcus said quietly, holding it out to Micah. "Said it was for his great-grandson." Micah stared at it, then looked at me. I nodded once. He took the watch with both hands, careful and slow. Marcus turned to me. "He told me he was proud of you. Said you did good." I didn't know what to say. For a second, all I could do was nod. Then Marcus turned and walked back the way he came. Micah looked up at me. "Does this mean I can go inside now?" I crouched beside him and smiled through the ache in my chest. "No, baby, it means you never had to." We walked back toward the house slowly. Micah's fingers clutched the pocket watch Marcus had handed him. He didn't say much, just kept flipping it over in his palm, watching the light catch on its scratched gold surface. I could tell he was trying to understand the weight of it, not just physically, but what it meant. What it said that, after everything, Grandpa Elias had chosen to leave this to him. I had no idea what we'd find when we got back to the porch. A part of me expected the door to be locked again, but instead it stood open. Velda was still there, standing at the top of the steps. Her arms were crossed, but she wasn't blocking the doorway anymore. Her face was unreadable, but something in her eyes had shifted, just a little. My mother, Delia, had come out now too. She stood behind Velda, her hand resting against the porch post like it was holding her up. Micah let go of my hand and walked up the steps by himself. He stopped in front of Velda and held up the pocket watch. "My grandpa gave this to me." Velda blinked, caught off guard. "That belonged to Elias when he was a boy." "I know," Micah said. "He said it's mine now." Velda looked at the watch, then at him, and for the first time she didn't look angry. She looked confused, lost. Micah looked her right in the eye and asked, "Why did he call me before he died?" The silence came again, but this time it wasn't cold. It was still, listening. Micah looked around at everyone gathered on the porch, distant cousins, great-uncles, people who hadn't even acknowledged us earlier. And then he stepped forward and stood in the doorway. He turned around slowly and said louder this time, "If I'm not part of this family, then why did he call me?" No one answered. Not a single voice rose up to challenge him. It wasn't just a question, it was a statement. A truth spoken so simply that no one could refute it, not even Velda. And then, something unexpected happened. My mother walked forward. Delia had always been distant, cold even. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn her love and never feeling like I quite made it. But now, she looked at Micah with eyes I hadn't seen in years. Soft, sad, human. She bent down, slowly, so they were eye level. "I don't know why," she whispered, "but I think he saw something in you the rest of us were too blind to see." Micah just nodded, quiet as ever. Then, without waiting for permission, he walked inside, just like that. No one stopped him. And that's when it really hit me. The house didn't decide who belonged. Neither did the traditions or the names in the family Bible. It was Elias. He had made his decision. Long before he died, he had chosen Micah, not for appearances, not to make a statement, but because he saw what so few others had taken the time to see: love, loyalty, strength, legacy. I followed Micah through the front hall, past the portraits of ancestors who never would have welcomed me, and a child they never deserved, but I didn't feel bitter anymore. I felt free. Micah stopped in front of the mantel, where Grandpa's final portrait stood in a thick, carved wooden frame. His face was serious in the photo, almost stern, but I knew that look. That was the look he gave when he was standing up for something, or someone. Micah placed the pocket watch on the mantel, just below the photo. Then he took the picture of the two of them from his backpack and leaned it right beside it. Two photos, side by side, one generation honoring another and being honored in return. Behind us, the room had filled with quiet footsteps. No one spoke, but I could feel their eyes. Velda stood in the doorway, her lips parted slightly as if to say something, but nothing came out. And that was okay, because the truth had already been spoken. Micah turned to me and said, "Can we go now?" I smiled and nodded. "Yeah, baby, we can." As we walked out of the house, this house that had once rejected us, no one stopped us. No one dared. Because in the end, Micah didn't need their permission to belong. He had already become the most unforgettable part of the Whitmore legacy, and no one, not even Velda, could deny it anymore. The sun was just starting to dip behind the trees as we walked back to the car. Micah was quiet, but not in the same way he had been on the way there. This wasn't the silence of uncertainty. This was something steadier, settled, a child who had spoken his truth and stood in it. He climbed into the back seat and buckled his belt without a word. I paused, one hand on the driver's side door, and looked back at the house, that big, beautiful old home where I'd once believed my future would unfold. It looked different now, not because it had changed, but because I had. And so had Micah. As I pulled out of the gravel drive, neither of us said anything for the first few minutes. Then I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him staring out the window, the corner of his framed photo just visible in his backpack. "You did something really brave today," I said. He didn't look up. "I didn't feel brave. I felt nervous." I smiled. "That's how you know it was brave." He nodded slowly. "Do you think Grandpa heard me?" "I do," I said. "And I think he was proud of you. Proud that you remembered his words. Proud that you told the truth, even when it was hard." Micah leaned his head against the window. "I don't think I need them to like me." That hit me harder than I expected. All this time, I'd been trying to shield him from rejection, trying to fill in the gaps left by people who didn't show up, hoping he'd never notice. But he had noticed, and instead of letting it define him, he met it with dignity. "I don't think you do either," I said, "because the people who love you the most don't need convincing. They just do." He smiled a little and closed his eyes. That drive home felt like shedding an old skin, not just for him. For me, too. For years, I'd carried around this belief that maybe I was still the broken branch of the family tree, that leaving had meant I lost my roots. But the truth was, my roots didn't end at the doorstep of that house. They went deeper, into the love I built with my son, into the strength I found in the absence of their approval, into the quiet wisdom Grandpa gave us both in the time we did have. And Micah was not a mistake to hide or defend. He was proof that the most powerful legacies don't come from bloodlines or surnames. They come from the courage to love without conditions. After we got home, we placed the photo and pocket watch on our mantel, right in the center. It didn't need a label or a long explanation. It was enough that it was there. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten. No return address, but I recognized the neat, sharp penmanship. It was from Aunt Velda. The letter wasn't long. She didn't apologize, not exactly, but she wrote, "I still don't agree with how things were handled, but I will say this. Elias never spoke about anyone the way he spoke about that boy. He said Micah had the kind of soul you couldn't teach, only hope to be near before you go. Maybe he was right." I folded the letter and put it in the same drawer where I keep Grandpa's old Christmas cards, the ones he used to mail even when no one else did. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Micah had already said everything that needed to be said, and that was the most surprising thing of all. How the smallest voice in the room turned out to be the one that echoed the loudest. In the end, this story isn't about the rejection, it's about the reckoning. It's about a boy who walked into a room full of people who didn't believe he belonged and reminded them that love isn't inherited, it's chosen. And if Elias Whitmore chose anyone, it wasn't the loudest one in the family. It wasn't the most obedient. It was the quiet boy with the photograph in his hands and the truth in his heart. That day, Micah didn't just say goodbye to his great-grandfather. He claimed his place in a legacy that tried to shut him out and made it unmistakably, irrevocably his. And now, he never asks why we don't visit them, because he already knows the truth. He came from love. He walks in legacy. And he belongs everywhere he stands. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that family isn't just about blood, but about who shows up, who chooses you, and who loves you for who you are, then I hope you carry that with you today. Because sometimes the loudest truth comes from the quietest voices. If you felt something while watching, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever had to stand up for your worth in front of people who didn't see it? I read everyone. And if stories like this speak to you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. This is more than storytelling. It's about seeing ourselves in one another. Thank you for being here. Until next time, take care of yourself and take up space like you belong there, because you do.